Okay, welcome everyone to Aria group training sessions. Today we'll discuss the accounts receivable session number 2. Last month we discussed the first accounts receivable session, and we discussed the basic functionality of the AR module, like how to record a payment with different types, how to key off and apply the payments to the debits or to the invoices of the customers, and we discussed some key reports in the AR functionality, like how to run accounts receivable aging and other key reports. Today we are going to continue discussing the accounts receivable module functionality. So supposedly anyone who is attending this session has a basic background of Aria 4 XP, and particularly topics related to the accounts receivable and to the customer master. So the prerequisites of our class today is to have basic navigation, how to navigate through the Aria menus, how to maintain and how to inquire the customer master file, and basic information or basic knowledge about the Aria XP menus. The course outcome of today, we will learn after the end of this class, we'll learn how to approve sales orders and how to approve them against or within the credit limit, and how to maintain the credit limit by customer as well. We'll learn how to invoice a sales order with different types, either a single store order or a multi-store orders. We'll know the difference between the regular invoice and the consolidated invoice, and we'll see how to set up the customer master in order to create a consolidated invoice, either for several orders or for one order with several stores, to issue one consolidated invoice no matter how many stores or how many orders for the same customer. We'll also learn how to create a return authorization or an RA to authorize the client for returning merchandise. Then we'll know how to create a credit memo to approve or to receive the return merchandise and to confirm and close the RA issued previously. And finally, we'll discuss how to print key AR reports and forms, like how to print the sales journal report, the sales summary report, and other mandatory forms like the invoice form, the RA form, and the credit memo form. So we'll start with the first section in today's session, which is about sales order approval and maintaining the credit limit on the customer master. Keep a note, guys, that we'll have a 10-15 minutes at the end for any questions, so you can feel free to text them on the GoToMeeting or prepare them, and at the end we'll have an open discussion to address your questions, or probably share ideas and business points that you face within your company that you might need answers for within Aria AR module. So now we are going to move to Aria menu. By going to the main menu, transactions, sales order, order approval. This is the menu option responsible for approving the sales orders. When we click on that screen, it will open up simply a list of all the current active accounts, all the current active customers. You can search either by the account code or you can locate by the customer name. You will see the current credit limit of that customer. You will see the balance due and the available credit for each customer code. The screen is split into two tabs, the account tab and the orders tab. Both screens are correlating to each other. So the account that I am highlighting in the accounts tab, it will correlate to the related orders for that account in the orders tab, and so on and so forth. Normally speaking, before you do order approval, and if you decided to use that functionality, you would need to maintain the credit limits on the customer level. So to show you how to maintain the credit limit, before we go further with that screen, I'm gonna go to master data, customer file, and I'll pull up any of the existing customers on the main account level, edit the current record, then go to special tab, and in the special tab, that's where you can maintain the credit limit and the expiration date associated with that credit. So again, in customer master, you select the account code, you edit the changes, you go to special tab, and then you'll be here able to enter the credit limit that you plan to give to that customer, and also you can associate an expiration date with that credit. So here, just to give you an idea about the business scenarios or the business usage of that, let us say your company is tracking the payment directly with the customer, and you are the one who gives the customer the credit, and you need to make sure the system alerts you or tells you whenever the customer runs out of credit, or how many credit limit or credit availability still this customer has. So that's when you can maintain the credit limit, and you assign the amount that you see suitable based on the volume of that account, and you also can associate an expiration date for that credit. Normally speaking, if you deal with a factor, or if you are you give the invoices to a factor who keep track of the collections on your behalf, normally speaking, you do not need to maintain the credit limit if that's the case with your business. So again, you would need to use the credit limit and the sales order approval in case if you are the one who follow up the collection and the payments from your customers. So now going back to the sales order menu, order approval, the screen is very simple and it has some functionality. It could let you simply, if you highlight the account column and you start type in, you can type in the 5-digit account code, or you can search by the account name using the binocular icon or the search icon. So by locating the account code, you will be able to check market, and you will be able to see what's the current credit limit, what's the current balance due, either credit or debit. If it's minus, usually means the customer is credit. If it's plus, meaning it's debit or the customer owes you money. What you can do is to calculate or ask the system to recalculate or recompute the credit availability. So here, once I click recompute credit availability, the system will simply check the most up-to-date balance. It will check the current credit limit in the customer master, and it will give you the available credit. So if the customer is debit, normally, like for that instance, JCPenney for instance, JCPenney is debit with 2,124, while he has a credit limit of 10,000. So that means the available credit balance would be 7,875. So this function could work on one account, or you can select all accounts and you can simply recalculate or recompute the credit limit availability for all the accounts. So this is the first function. The second function, if you are ready to approve orders for any given account, you select the account first, and then you can either approve in batch by clicking the approve button on this section, or if you would like to approve manually, you still can do that by going to the orders tab, and then it will open up all the accounts for Macy's or JCPenney or whatever the account that you have, and simply you can switch the status from hold to open, and that means once the status is changed to open, you can put an approval number, and this will be approved order and it's ready to be shipped. You can furthermore decide the approved amount, comparing that with the open amount on the sales order. So here, this screen can be used actually as a dual purpose functionality. It can be used to either place order on hold or to approve on hold order and put it as open status. So again, it's a dual functionality. It could be used either to approve an on hold order and put the approval number and the amount approved, or furthermore, if you do have an order that is open and for any reason there is no sufficient credit or whatever, you can place the order on hold and you can put you can attach a hold reason like no credit, out of business, or any kind of predefined on hold reason codes. Once you click OK, the system will save the changes for the group of sales orders pertaining to that account, and then you can repeat the same process for another account you selected. You go to the Orders tab, and then you'll be able to simply switch the status to open to approve, or if you'd like to put the order on hold, you switch it from open to hold and then associate a reason for putting that account on hold, or the other way around, associating the approval number if the order is approved. So this is how the screen works, and as I mentioned, you can decide to approve in batch. If you simply choose to approve in batch for the entire account, the system will go and check the credit availability against the list of sales orders, and it will go approve them in batch depending on the credit availability, and it will scan the orders based on the completion date. So it will start approving the orders with earlier completion date, then it will go to the next orders and so on depending on the sorting in that screen. So you can see here, after you batch approve, you can see what orders has been approved and what are not and are still pending more credit or are still pending manual approval. So that's for sales order approval functionality, and the conclusion or the results of that would be an order status will be changed from hold to open, meaning that it's approved. You will associate the approved amount, the approval number. In the other case, if the order was put on hold for any reason, the status will switch from open to hold, and you will put a reason for putting that order back on hold. As this happens, the system of course will recalculate the credit limit availability, and at any moment you can actually look the credit available for that customer and decide if they can still do or they can still be allowed for more sales order. So the next slides here are just simply describing a step-by-step how to navigate through the order approval. So we discussed in that section why the sales order approval is needed, and we discussed the different business scenarios if your company is doing factoring or factored invoices versus non-factored invoices, and it's typically would be needed in case of non-factor to keep track of the credit limit and the sales order approval. We discussed where the credit limit for the customer is entered, how the system recalculates the current credit available, how to approve orders by account, either in batch or to approve individually by sales order, the status field and the approval number field and the importance of them, and finally how to put back a sales order to on hold status and to stamp a reason for putting the sales order on hold. In the next topic of that session, we will discuss the invoice sales order, and invoicing is typically one of the crucial functionality in the AR business area or in the AR department. So billing could have actually different types depending on your customer and depending on the type of the sales order. So now we'll navigate to the main menu, transaction screen, accounts receivable module, then invoice sales order. So this is our path to issue an invoice for an existing sales order. The screen interface is the same. It asks you first to confirm the invoice date, which is by default today's date. The posting date typically is the same like the invoice date. The only case that you might need to change the posting date from the invoice date. If, let us say, for accounting purpose, you issue the invoice today, but you just don't want it to post your accounting until the end of this week or until the end of the month. So in that case, you have the opportunity to override the posting date. And again, the whole purpose of the posting date is just for the accounting records. When it moves to your GL or to your accounting system, it will go with the posting date rather than the invoicing date. So now once you confirm the dates, you can select by more than one option. You can select to invoice either by the sales order number, or if you allocated the order, you can select to invoice by pick ticket number. So this is the first method of invoicing. So let's say I know the pick ticket number, so you still can browse for it, or you can type the pick ticket number that you would like to invoice. The system automatically knows and links back the pick ticket number to the related invoice. You will see that the information simply flow from the sales order and the pick ticket. So there is minimal amount of information that you need to enter since everything is entered already on the sales order. The first screen is listing of all the pick tickets selected or by store in case if that's a multi-store order, as we'll see in the next scenario. System will simply list in that screen all the pick tickets and all the customer stores that will be issued an invoice within that session. Then there will be a header tab. The header tab is normally the same. It's copied from the sales order. So whatever information was entered on the sales order will carry over to the invoice. Billing address, shipping address, payment terms, etc. Of course, you can override any piece of information as needed. So if you want to revise the terms, you can do that. Just keep in mind when you modify the terms, you will notice automatically the due date of the invoice will be changed to reflect the changes on the term code. So this is every other information is typically flow from the sales order. You can revise as needed. You can revise the ship via. You can stamp a special instructions. You can put a short notes, etc. Or you can revise the sales rep if it's different from whatever in the sales order. So normally speaking, this header tab is the same like the sales order. Details tab is also copying the lines, the style, color, and the size breakdown in the sales order. And here there is important thing for you to know. If you are issuing an invoice by pick ticket, then the information here on the lines would be the information of the pick ticket, not of the sales order. So that means that when we have a partially shipped orders and the packers or the people who allocated the order for any reason, for any short shipping reason, they modified the pick ticket. When you invoice by pick ticket, the quantity shown on the invoice will be actually the quantity allocated and picked on the pick ticket, not the original quantity on the sales order. So this is just information on how the workflow or how the information flow works. Pricing and everything else on the detail tab will simply come from the sales order, and the quantity will come from the pick ticket related. Depending on your company setup, you might be allowed to revise the price, but normally speaking, default setup is to disable or to prevent modifying the price on the invoice. So if you do have other requirements, you can contact us and we can help you revise the company setup to either enable or disable modifying the price information at the time of invoice. Finally, charges tab is simply the summary of the invoice, and here it calculates for you the total shipped quantity, total shipped amount. If there is any merchandise discount that you want to deduct from the invoice, you can add that here. So you can add it as a percentage. If there is any freight charges to be added to the invoice, also you can add that here. Only in case of UPS carriers or UPS charges, ship vias, the system can add a UPS predefined insurance, and this will be added automatically to the total charge of the invoice. Also, depending on the selected ship via on the header tab, the system would calculate any COD charges if there is any, and this is also it's predefined or set up in advance on the codes file in the company setup. So you just take a look on that screen, you make sure you deducted any discount or you added any other freight charges or COD charges. Then the system will calculate the total balance for you. If there is any trade discount typically associated with the payment terms, it will come up over here. So trade discount, the difference between trade discount and merchandise discount. Merchandise discount is taken off the invoice directly. So as you can see, the 5% is deducted from the invoice amount and is reflected in the balance to pay. While the trade discount is actually a discount related to the payment terms. So it would be given only at the time of payment. So that's why whenever I put a trade discount here, or if it's populated by the term code, it's not affecting the balance to pay. Again, it will be applied only at the time you receive the payment from the customer, and then you'll apply that trade discount against the payment. Okay, so now finally, last piece of information you need to know of: if the customer account that you selected is set up as factor account on the customer master, the factor code will come up by default. You still have the option to override that information if for some reason or the other the majority of the invoices on that customer are factored, but just one of them is non-factor, so the system allows you to override the factor information field. There is additional information related to the shipping, like the tracking number, and normally you can either copy and paste that, or if your system is integrated with the UPS functionality, simply you can get that number automatically populated for you from either the UPS, and we also have now integration with FedEx. So if you are interested with any of these add-ons, you can contact Aria support and we can give you more information. So now, after the invoice charges are verified and calculated, you save the invoice. And finally, here the system gives you a final confirmation to review the total pieces, total amount, total weight. And if everything is good to go, you simply click OK, proceed to generate the invoice. Once this is done, the system will issue you an invoice number, and you can, furthermore, you can add a free format text, or if not, you can bypass that and the invoice will be saved. So this is the first type of invoicing, which is by single store. You select one order, one pick ticket at the time. It's issuing one invoice, one store. So now what if I want to generate an invoice for a multi-store, and the next scenario even more, if I want to consolidate invoices for different orders or different stores into one invoice. So we'll go over the first scenario. If I have a group of sales orders that I want to issue an invoice for, instead of selecting one by one, there is a very nice tool which is Scope Orders. When you click on Scope Orders, which is the binocular icon in the toolbar, that will open up a selection criteria for you. And you can search, or you can select orders even by pick ticket range from and to, or by sales order in range, or by any of other parameters on the screen, like the start date range, the completion date range, orders belong to a specific account, and so on and so forth. So let us take an example here. Let us say I have a multi-store order and I do know the range of pick tickets that I'm gonna generate. So I can select the first range, the first number in range, and the last number in the range of the pick tickets. And to avoid mixing up several customers, if that range is including several customers, I can furthermore narrow down my search criteria by the customer account. And once I click OK, the system will simply locate the entire range of pick tickets. Sorry, let me do that again. So I'm gonna go here, orders with big tickets, and I know that I have this big ticket number as the beginning, and this is the last big ticket. So whatever in between these numbers would be selected. Here we go. So the system, as you can see, it automatically give you the related big tickets number, and if the customer is set up to consolidate invoices, it can furthermore give you one invoice per DC, as we'll see in a minute. Everything else in that screen interface will typically work the same way. So you'll have header information, you'll have details information, and charges information for each and every big ticket selected, or each and every sales order selected in that range. So as you can see here, this is a big ticket number. This is the quantity open. This is the quantity to be shipped for each and every big ticket. So now let me show you another scenario. I'm gonna have to go back to the customer master. So what if the customer would like to have a separate invoice for each DC, or a consolidated invoice for each DC? We do have a parameter to do that on the customer master screen. So going back to the customer master, special tab, then we'll edit. We'll see here two parameters: consolidated invoice, yes or no, and consolidate by DC, yes or no. What this parameter is doing, it's actually, if you say yes to the first option, meaning that you can consolidate several orders belonging to the same account into one invoice. If you say consolidate invoice and consolidate by DC, then within the same multi-store orders, the system will be able to consolidate invoices by DC and group them together and issue a new invoice every time the distribution center is changed. So these parameters are very important. If you don't care about the DC and you just need to issue a consolidated invoice for the entire range of orders for that customer, then you can keep consolidate to DC or consolidate by DC as well. So let us see, after we change that parameter, if we took the same, if we go back to the invoicing, sales order, confirm the date, and go to the selection by scope, orders with big tickets, and let me select the same range of big tickets for the same customer account, and click OK. So now, as you noticed here, the lines that have a DC or that have a store, no matter what, all of them will be combined or consolidated in the first line. So this is actually the total ship quantity and total ship amount for all the stores or DCs belonging to the selected range of orders. So what will happen here at the end, I will have only one invoice. So if I click save, let us see the batch summary. The batch summary will give me one invoice, total 282 pieces, and this is the total amount and any carton, any weight, etc. Versus the other way around, if the consolidation parameter is set to no, then I will have a single invoice for each record, for each order or store or big ticket. So that's very important and helpful parameter, since nowadays many of the customer, particularly the EDI customers, may require you to issue a consolidated invoice. They do not need to have an invoice for each store. So if you deal particularly with department stores, you might need to switch the consolidation option to yes, particularly if the partner requires to have one invoice for a group of stores or one invoice for DC. So now, before we move to the next topic, the last step is to how to inquire the invoice and how to print it either from the output or from the invoice screen. If I just need to print one invoice, you still can go to transaction menu, accounts receivable, invoice, and this screen is to inquire the invoices, and also it lets you print out the invoice form. So if I go here and either browse for my invoice number or I can type it in. So I'll locate the invoice number, the one that I would like to inquire. This is the details and this is the charges on the invoice. So this is just an inquiry screen. You can, from within that option, you can go to File, Print as a shortcut. So instead of going to the output like usual, like when you print any normal report, this is a shortcut. So while you are inquiring the invoice, you can directly go to print the invoice form related. Just keep in mind that there is a status for the printing, a print status for the invoice. By default, the system will print you whatever is not printed from before. So if the invoice has been printed already, make sure to include that in the status selection to reprint a copy of the invoice. There is some cool features in the invoice form. You can add like a footer to the invoice form. It could be used for terms and conditions. It could be used for return policy, etc., etc. So this is a free text and you can type it here and save it. So every time you go to print an invoice, this optional message will show up on the invoice. It could be a promotional statement, a marketing statement, whatever you would like to use as a optional message. You can utilize that, and as I'm going to show you now in a minute, it will show and print out on the invoice form. So now I'm previewing the invoice form, and this is a standard invoice form that will have your company name on it. It will have the account name, the ship to address and name, basic information about the invoice, and the line item, style, color, size breakdown, quantity, price, total amount, and any charges or discounts on that invoice. Here is at the end, the footer message will show up here in that section. So as we mentioned, this could be used generically to enter any payment terms, details, any conditions, any return policy, any marketing messages, so you can utilize that space to print on the invoice. So now this is how to print one invoice at the time. If you'd like to print several invoices, then best practice is to do that from the output. So the same option is available if you navigate to output menu, accounts receivable, invoice. So this is my path to print a range or to print invoices in range or by batch. So when I go here, it will open exactly the same criteria, and I will be able to go. If I want to add an optional message, the same will be memorized from the last time I entered. And I can here go to invoice number, and in that case, using the toolbar functionality, you can select in range, you can select multiple invoice, pick and select whatever you would like to do. So here if I selected more than one invoice, apply selection, either print preview, print or export the report. This is the typical Aria output functionality available in any report. So you will be able to see all the entire and print the entire range of invoices that you would like to either send to your customers or to keep a copy for your accounting records and so on. Okay, so now we are done with discussing the invoicing section. We discussed in that section several types of invoices and several scenarios. In other words, several business scenarios. We saw how to invoice a single store order, and thus we'll have a single invoice per store. We discussed how to invoice a multi-store order and how to select in range, either by pick ticket number, by order number, or by account. We discussed the difference between the consolidated invoice and the regular invoice and what parameter affect that on the customer master. And we saw how the information flow from the sales order or the pick ticket to the invoice. If there is a pick ticket, we mentioned that the picked quantity will be the one invoiced, not the original order. And finally, we discussed the charges tab and the invoice batch summary to audit and reconcile the invoicing charges before you save and you generate the invoice. So we'll move to the next topic in that training session, which is the return merchandise, how to manage the return authorization and how to post a credit memo to confirm a return authorization and to issue the credit for the customer. So we'll go back to the Aria interface. We'll navigate to the main menu, transactions, then return merchandise module. Then that module simply has two options, the return authorization and the credit memo. Return authorization is our first step, and this is used to create an RA or return authorization to authorize your customer for a specific items to be returned. So when we open that screen, it will, first of all, you'll have to initiate a new record. So you click add new record. Then you select the account code either from the browse list or by typing the account code if you know it. Always you can click on the browse list button and you can here navigate by either the account code or by the account name. So I'm going to locate the same account number, let's say Macy's Northeast. Furthermore, you can assign the RA to a specific store, and this would be helpful in case if it's a department store with multi-store numbers, so you can authorize only one store at the time. You still can authorize the main account in general, and at the time you receive the credit memo, you will be able to decide which store it came from. The screen is simple. It has header tab and details tab. The header tab will have the return authorization validity date. It's void after, so you authorize the customer to return merchandise within, let's say, 1 week or 2 weeks. You put the audit total, how many pieces you plan or you authorize the customer to return, and you put the total dollar amount. These fields are just for auditing purpose, so at the end the system will verify the totals against this total piece and total amount. Return to is very important, especially if you do have more than location warehouse. If you have more than one warehouse location, you can choose you authorize to return this merchandise to a specific location code. So when you print the RA and send it to your customer, they know which address they have to send it to. If you do have a single location or single warehouse, then this field will be disabled. You will only have one location by default that the merchandise go to. You can decide also how many cartons will fit in that return authorization, and you can link the RA to either an invoice number or to a sales order number. So if I want to link this authorization to a particular invoice, I click on the list, I navigate and select the invoice number, and I will have in that case another option if I checked it to return the entire invoice. What that means is when I choose to return entire invoice, meaning all the style color information on the invoice will flow to the RA, meaning that the customer is authorized to return the whole shipment or the whole invoice. If not, then you will do manually the information or the data entry on the line level, as we'll see now. Before we move to the lines, there is another important data to enter. What is the reason for the return? Is it damaged goods, out of specs, wrong color, wrong size, etc.? And these are user defined. You can add to them as you go. So if you decided to add another reason to the return reason, you can click add new, and simply system will let you put another return merchandise reason. Okay, so this is the notes field, which is a free text note, and now we are ready to go to verify the details tab. As we mentioned, if in the header tab I selected return entire invoice, typically the system will copy and return the entire lines on that invoice. So there is minimal data entry to do in that case. All the quantity and the style line items on the invoice will return to will be included in the return authorization. The good thing that in case of partial return, you still can go and override. So I'm gonna put here the quantity that the customer actually will return, not the original invoice. So it's a good way, as you can see, that instead of doing the data entry, a simple trick that you can select to return the entire invoice, and then you can get rid or remove the lines that are not returned and keep only the lines that will be returned to the warehouse. Once you verify everything and you have now the lines corrected to reflect what you authorize your customer, the system will calculate the budgeted quantity. The open quantity will be the same, and the total open dollar amount you authorize the customer for. When you save, the system will make a final confirmation. Do you want to continue? Yes. And if the authorized amount that you put in the beginning for auditing purpose is mismatching, it will give you a warning message to accept. And here the system will give you the RA number, which will be the reference you sent to your customer. Free notes are just simply a memo field that you can generically put any additional notes. And now the RA number is saved in the database. It's issued a reference number, and you can revise it as long as the status is still open. You did not send it to the customer or to anywhere, so you can still do revisions by editing the record and modifying any of the information on the RA. If I want to print it, I can simply, like what we did in the invoice, I can go to File, Print, choose to the criteria of printing the RA. If I want to print the notepad, yes or no. There is normally two forms of the RA, either the receipt or the merchandise sticker. So normally the first step is to print the RA for receipt purpose, which would have a form, as we can see. And this form would have the RA number, it would have the account name, the return to, which is your warehouse address. It will have comments about the return reason, and the authorized item number, color and size breakdown, and any generic notes that your client or you want to type for your clients. So this form will be the one associated as a paperwork when the box arrives to the warehouse. So that's, you send it to your customer in advance as a PDF document, or mail it or fax it to your client, and then they will associate that RA with the merchandise when it arrives to the warehouse. So now our next step is, after the return authorization or the RA is issued, the customer will receive it, and on the actual credit date he will send you the merchandise. Your warehouse people will receive the merchandise, and that's when you actually post a credit memo to confirm and close the RA. So from the same module, from the return merchandise transactions credit memo, we'll go to that option to create a new credit memo, and in that case we can select the same customer account, can select the store if applicable, and we can link it back to the return authorization number that we received. And as a workflow, as we mentioned, the customer typically would include a copy of the RA with the merchandise. So this way you can know what credit memo given to what RA number. And here you simply confirm the actual credit date, which normally could be different than the RA date. And header information again will carry over from the RA, so there is minimal information to be entered. If the RA is linked to a sales order and invoice, this information will come through. If there is a factor code associated with the invoice, also it will come through. Payment terms, reason of returning, etc. All this information is there. Okay, and here I can put additional note like received by warehouse on 11/20, let's see. And finally, the details is simply the same item number and the same color size breakdown that was indicated on the RA. So definitely there might be changes. Maybe you authorize the customer for two pieces of size extra large, but they actually returned one piece. So here is the place where you can overwrite and you put the actual quantity received and the actual quantity that your customer will be credited for. Once you revise the information on the line level and the header level, you save the changes, and now the system will give you a warning. There is an open quantity in the current RA. Do you want to receive this RA completely, canceling the open quantity, or receive it partially, leaving the RA open? So because we overwrite the information on the line item, there is one piece left open. I can choose to either just completely cancel or receive the RA, or I keep the balance open for later on. The customer maybe will send the balance on a different credit memo number. So that's why we got that warning message, and that's the use of it, that you can either cancel the RA or you can keep it open, and the balance will be left open until you receive a new credit memo number. Simply, if I want to print that credit memo right away while I'm there, I'm gonna select it again in the same screen. We didn't go anywhere, and then I'll go to File, Print, same like the RA and the invoice form. It will let me go directly to print the credit memo. And similar to the invoice, you can add any message on the credit memo note if you want to. Print, preview, export the report, or print to the printer. This will be the three available options, and you will get a credit memo form that confirms the receipt of the merchandise. It will confirm the number of carton, the style, color received, the quantity, and the credit amount given to your customer. So you can email this back to your customer once your warehouse receives the merchandise, and to confirm the credit is given and posted to your customer account. Okay, so that completes the return merchandise cycle. Let us see what we discussed so far. So we discussed how to use the RA, return authorization, how to input it, and how to link it to an invoice or a sales order in case if it's related to an invoice or sales order, how to save the RA and how to print it. We discussed the credit memo, and the credit memo step is actually when the merchandise is confirmed received in the warehouse, and at this time there's two things happen. The customer account balance will be credited with the amount, and the inventory balance will receive back the quantity issued or the quantity delivered by the credit memo and received back in the warehouse. So this will be the effects of the credit memo on the RA, on the inventory, and on the customer balance. Our final topic in that session would be to discuss the reports and forms. Most of the forms we already saw how to print an invoice form, how to print a credit memo form, and how to print an RA form. So we'll go now to discuss the other key reports in the accounts receivable module. So any report, as you might know, you have to navigate to the output menu, then accounts receivable module, and then you can go to the transactions submenu. Transaction submenu have a bunch of important AR reports. The time will not be enough today to discuss all of them, so I'm gonna try to focus on the key reports. The first important and key AR report is the AR aging, and this is, as the name indicates, it's to show you the aging of the balances of your customer. How old are they? Overdue with invoices, what is the balance of each period, and so on. So aged AR, or accounts receivable aging, is a date sensitive report. You can put the period ending date, which is up until what date you want the report to run, and accordingly age the outstanding invoices. You can decide if you want the date buckets to be different than the standard. Normally, any aging report would be a 30 days period or a 30 days date bucket. So I give you the aging for the previous 30 days, the previous 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, and so on. You still can change that if needed, but typically most of accountants or most of AR departments, they follow up on invoices on a 30 days interval. If you say show past due only, that means it will exclude any invoices that are still due in the future. If you say no to that parameter, it will include everything, no matter if it's due in the future or if it's past due. You can choose a new page per account. That's just how the page break will work if you want to split the report and probably keep a copy for each account. So normally it's a good practice to say new page per account. Include keyed off transaction is automatically or by default is set to yes, so I'm not going to change it. And that's the reason for that, just to explain to you, when the system or when you put the date of the report backward to any previous date, the system will scan and see the invoice status as of that date. It will see if the invoice was open or closed as of that date and what was the due date of the invoice back then. All other parameters normally you would keep on the default, so I'm not gonna bother change. Like normally you would need to see debits and credits, you would need to see factor and non-factor. All these are selection criteria for you if in case you want to narrow down your selection. What you need to know that this aging report comes in 3 different formats or 3 different layouts: the detail, summary, and short. The detail is itemized. It's showing you each item of the aging for the customer, and it lists you the amount due under the corresponding period. So let us do that. I'm going to select, let us say, one account. So I'm going to go to the accounting list and select the same account that we have activity for. Of course, you can select multiple accounts. You can select range of accounts. So the same tools available to select multiple records is here. And once you are ready to preview the report, you click Print Preview. And this is the detail format or the itemized format, which give you the account header information, and then it lists you the transaction item by item or invoice by invoice, along with the invoice due date, the balance of the invoice, and whether it is a current balance or it's overdue or it's falling within any specific period depending on the invoice due date. The summary of that report will be by account. It will give you the total aging for all the transactions. It will give you any applied credits, which could be credit adjustment or credit for payments, and then it will give you the net balance open for that customer account. So this is the first format. The second format, which is the summary, it's just giving you the short version of that without the details. So same information, but it will give you the balance of the customer without listing each transaction, so you can tell how much debit is current balance, how much is overdue, 30 days, 60 days, and what's overdue more than 90 days, and then give you the unapplied credit, the same like other report. The last format is the short format, and this is typically good for end of month reconciliation or for management purpose. If they just want to see a brief and a consolidated report, the short format is usually the way to go. And this format is typically printing one account per line. So here it will give you the summary of each account, the current balance, the overdue 30 days, overdue to 60 days, 90 days, and so on. So again, the short format is good in case if you want to run it for the entire accounts to reconcile or to see how much you have as a balance overdue or what each customer owes you at the end of the month. So here I'm going to run it for the entire accounts, and this will give me one line per account, account code, account name, balance, and aging information for that customer. So that's the AR aging, and as we mentioned, it comes in 3 different formats. It's date sensitive, so you can decide as of what date you want to print the report, and the system will recalculate the balances as of that date. The next key report that we have within the AR functionality is the sales journal report. So that's still under output, accounts receivable, transactions, and sales journal report. Sales journal is just a detailed report by invoice. It could be also summarized, or it could be printed in 2 different formats, detail or summary. It runs based on the invoice item. So any sales order that have been invoiced would be reflected in the sales journal report. You can customize the way it will be sorted, so you can have up to 2 different sorting options. Let's say I want to sort it first by account, and then secondly, as a sort option number 2, I want to sort it by invoice or by sales rep or whatever of this parameter. So this is just the way how the records will be arranged in the report layout. Other criteria, normally you would keep it as is on the default setting. Like by default, it will include factor and non-factored invoice. If you want to avoid or exclude the voided invoice, this parameter is important, so you can take a note that if you did not change it, it will be active and void, meaning that both invoices active or void will show up. If you say active, then it will eliminate the voided invoice and show you only the active invoice. Other than that, you can select by the transaction date or the invoice date, the account number. You can select by sales rep. All these parameters are optional to get your sales journal within a certain date or for certain account for certain sales rep. So here one of the tips that you can use, you can click here on the transaction date and you can choose one of the predefined values like this month, next month, whatever, this year, etc. So that will automatically fill in the date range for the predefined value that you selected. Other options, as we mentioned, is to fine-tune your criteria. If you don't need other than the date, simply leave them empty, and then you go to print preview to see the sales journal for the selected criteria. So that's the report layout. It lists each individual invoice, the invoice date, the account number, the related sales order, the total quantity ordered, what has been shipped as far as the amount, the shipping charges, the discount, invoiced amount, and factored amount. And it gives you subtotal by account. So this report, as we mentioned, is good to reconcile your day-to-day sales activity, and also at the end of the month it would be a good report to reconcile and to tell how much sales you have done, broken down by account, broken down by invoice. So now I'm running the report for everything just to show you the layout. So that's now sorted by customer account code. As you can see, there is a subtotal for each customer code. So you can tell by looking at that report how much sales you are doing for each account, quantity wise and amount wise. The last format or the second format of that report is the summary, and the summary format is a short version of the report. It's basically showing you the subtotal based on the sorting option that you chose. So if I am sorting by account and I choose summary format, typically you would get a line item per account, a one line item per account. So let me see what the layout will look like here in case of summary sorted by account. As you can see, it gives me one line for each account. So it's a shorter version just to give you the subtotal based on the sorting option you choose. So that's a very good report for management purpose, again, to just have a glance on the entire account's activities regarding the sales, quantity, dollar amount, and total charges. And as we mentioned, the summary format works based on the sorting option. So if I choose any other sorting option, like by sales rep, by region, etc., what I will get will be the subtotal for that sorting option. So let us see if I choose to sort it by sales rep, how that will affect the layout. So here, if I do have a sales rep assignment on the invoice, I will get one subtotal for sales rep. Obviously, this sample data has just only one house account, so it gives me the total for the house account and the subtotal for any other invoices. So as you can see, most of the reports in Aria and specifically in the AR module is you can customize it certain limit by choosing the way you sort the report, by choosing what format or what layout to print, details versus summary, and then you can fine tune your criteria by selecting activity date, selecting an account number, or any other filters that you would like to search by. The next and the last report we'll be able to discuss today is the sales summary, and this is also one important report for the accounts receivable. As we mentioned, there is not enough time, unfortunately, to discuss each and every report, but I'm sure you can look at the menu and you can go to the report that you think is of interest, and you can explore it at your own time. So last report is the sales summary report, and this is also under the accounts receivable output menu. It can be sorted by account or by division. It could show totals by store if you have a multi-store order, as we mentioned in the beginning, and each store has its own invoice. So you can choose to summarize the stores, or you can choose just to simply show each store invoice separately. So show totals by store. If it's yes, meaning it consolidates the store. If it's no, meaning that it prints one invoice per store. You can select by any of these criteria: account number, transaction date, season, division, etc. So if I printed it for everything from day one or from the beginning of the year till today's date, it will give me a sales summary based on the option that I choose to sort by. So here I chose by account. It gives me a brief idea of how much I sold to each account, quantity-wise and dollar-wise. Then it will give me a grand total for the entire company. The other format is sorted by division, and sorted by division, it would be helpful in case if your business has multiple divisions and you want to see how each division is doing regarding the sales activity. So this is one division, and this is women's division, or whatever the division code structure that you have in your company. It will rearrange the record using the division code. Alright, so I know that we are running short of time, but let us start the open discussion, and maybe you can spend 10-15 minutes for open discussion. So I'm gonna, if you'd like, just unmute your microphone, please, and bring your question. I guess I have a question already from Elizabeth. How to change the quantity of multi-store with big ticket and consolidated invoice. Okay, hi Elizabeth.
Hi,
Yes, hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Okay, so can you just explain a little bit what's the business case behind your question?
Okay, well, I have a multi-store order. How would I change, for instance, the quantity for a particular store, and then do an invoice from that?
Okay, so you want to modify the quantity allocated on the peak ticket, or
Exactly.
you want the allocated. Okay, so in that case, that would happen from the allocation by order screen. So you will go to transactions, sales order allocation, allocation by order, and of course, providing that you have the multi-store order number that you are looking for, you can pull it up. So let us say that order. If it's a multi-store, it will show up here all the stores associated with a big ticket number. So what you need to do is edit and just locate the store number that you want to reduce the quantity and go to the let me make the screen smaller so you can see the whole thing. So here, let's say Hoboken store for style 110 blue. So I want to allocate 8 pieces out of 10. So I'm gonna go here and override the allocated quantity. So once you do that change and you save the changes, the system will automatically revise that big ticket number to indicate the changes, and this will be the quantity that will flow to your invoice later on once you invoice by big ticket.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically within the allocation functionality. It's recommended to do it on the allocation. This way, the invoice will match the big ticket. There is no difference between the invoice and the big ticket.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Al.
No problem. So if anyone else have any other questions, guys, feel free to either speak out or text it, and I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Al. This is Mary Garcia. I'm going to have to hop off the call, but thank you so much for your time and your.
Sure, you're most welcome, Mary. My pleasure. Okay,
have a great day, Al.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening and have a great day.
Thank you, Al. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.